My name is Les Hackle, and I have a bomb in my neck. Just like everyone else.
So I saw Abruptio, and I still don't know how to digest this film, because it's something very, I love horror films, but this is something very, very, very different. So can you take me back to when you first got attached to this project? Because again, you've done so much over your career, but this feels very, very different because of, I mean, I don't think anyone's going to look at puppets the same way after this.
Correct. I always wanted to try to do as many different genres in film as I could. I want to do comedy, I want to do drama, melodrama, historical, I want to do it all. But I have never done horror. And the truth is, I'm not like you, Andy. I'm actually not a horror fan. I like a lot of different movies, but I find that if I want to be terrified, I watch the news,
That's fair.
But nevertheless, I mean, I know that horror has its place. I know that it can be a really cathartic experience to experience fear in the safety of a story, and that can be psychologically, can be really, really good. I just don't get that when I watch horror. So I had passed on a lot of horror projects just because, I don't know, I read them, I was like, I don't know, dear. And I read the script for Abruptio, and it was terrible. It was horrifying. It was just, God. Very scary, and then the thought came to me, well, they're going to do this with puppets, and so there's going to be that it'll be more palatable. There'll be something special about it that will make the horror a little easier to take, and I could see myself doing a project like that. One of my favorite films is, I think it's Air America, by the people who do South Park, and they do the whole thing with puppets, and there's something about that. That makes it just delicious, and so I signed on, and I have a soft spot in my heart for independent film production. I'm like everyone else. One of my favorite films is Star Wars, and I don't know if a lot of people know that was an independent film that was produced by George Lucas, and all the three originals. I think all of the Star Wars movies are produced without the help of a studio financially. I have done different independent projects for the last 20 years because I used to produce theater, and I like it when artists find the tools they need and get to work and are able to do the project that they imagined and not have interference from studios. And so I thought this would be a fun ride.
I can only imagine what it must have been like. I've read the script for the first time because even without even like seeing the imagery, like just I imagine like reading it must have been very, very intense because of I feel like everything Les does gets worse and worse and worse. So how was it reading for you the first time, and kind of how we're gonna do this?
Well, that was the thing, I mean, the horror of the script for me is, are human beings that selfish? We all wonder, are human beings good, intrinsically good, or are we intrinsically evil, or are we neutral? And we go round and round about this. And this script seems to say that if you are under the gun, I mean, let's just say the story is a world where a group of people have found a way to implant bombs in the carotid artery of their victims. And they plant these bombs in their sleep, and then they call them up the next day and say, we put a bomb, and unless you kill this family, we're going to kill you right now. And faced with that choice, I would like to think that I would say, you know what, just kill me. I'm not going to go out. I'm not going to become a mass murderer. I don't want that kind of life. I'd rather die. I'd like to think that I was like that. I think we all do. We all would like to think that. But there is the other possibility. I don't know till I get there. And what if I got that phone call? Would I be willing to do that? And the film says yes. There's a lot of people who would decide to do that. And that is truly horrifying. And so when I was reading the script, I had to put it down. I did not want to, it was too much. It was too intense. It was too horrifying. A lot of horror films are just running away from some maniac, and we hope we survive. But Abruptio, I think, opens a bigger can of worms than that. And I think that the true horror is that I may not be the kind of good person that I think I am. And that was too much for me. And I had to remember, like, hold on, buddy, we're doing this with puppets. So there's going to be, this movie is going to make people very uncomfortable, but the puppets are going to help. And then I saw it, and the puppets don't take away at all from the horror. In fact, I think the puppets probably make it more horrifying. In some, I don't know why. I think because of the kinds of puppetry they were using, it doesn't lessen the horror at all. And when I watched it, I was like, oh my God. Yeah, I don't know. What did you think? Like, was it more horrifying to you than a normal horror film?
Yes, because it doesn't, because the way that they produce these puppets, they look like human flesh almost. Like, they don't look like, it doesn't look animated, doesn't look CGI, which again, I'm very pro practical effects, especially with how easy people now get into with CGI these days. So for me, seeing it as very realistic as possible, it did make it more terrifying in my opinion. So I'm like, there were times when I'm like, like, what is the blood gonna look like? But no, it's human blood. It's just, again, like, that's why I love it. It's not like animation. It is live action, but essentially, if we all look like puppets, and I think that's very brilliant to do.
Yeah. And as a horror fan, did you find yourself thinking, okay, this is too much?
I think the first time around, I was like, okay, this is, because like you were talking about, most horror films deal with people, like we're running away from something. No, but because everything gets worse for him, I feel like, the first time I'm like, oh, this is why it stands out as much as, as a horror thriller in a lot of ways. But yeah, the second time around, I'm like, okay, now I can kind of digest it a little bit easier. But it's, again, that's why I love that when films like this can come around and stand out from what has come before, because I feel like now horror is becoming bigger and bigger now. A lot of franchises are coming back on both in film and TV. But with this, it was this felt like a very new experience. But it's still, I think it's going to throw off a lot of people initially in a good way. Yeah.
It's unlike anything I've ever seen before, and a very surprising take on the horror genre. You just wouldn't think to do it with puppets, and to be able to do that and keep it just as horrifying as or if not more horrifying than if it had been done with live actors. And also, that, I don't know, have you seen the movie Henry? This is back in the 90s, and it was, the lead character was the slasher, and you just follow him around as he's murdering people. And film is able to put you behind the eyes of the lead. That's how storytelling gives the audience a vicarious experience and a roller coaster ride, so to speak, as we tempt the audience to climb behind the eyes of the lead. And Henry was horrifying because it tempted me behind the eyes of a killer, of a horrible monster. And I was that person. And I think that Abruptio is a little bit similar. There is this group that we're able to plant the bombs, yes, but the hands that are killing people are mine. I'm less, everyone is, hopefully, who's watching the film, and we are made to become the monster, and have to wonder, is that me? Can I do that? Which I think is it's a much steeper mountain to climb. It's very easy to get the audience to climb behind the eyes of a beautiful, charming, funny character. It's a lot harder to get the audience to climb behind the eyes of someone who's doing horrific things.
Yeah, I think that's what it's, because again, I felt conflicted a lot of times when I'm like, this is just an ordinary guy, doesn't have the best life, but he's now in the situation. But again, he's doing all these things, but I'm like, damn, I just want, I was almost hoping that somehow, some way, someone was going to come save him, that he was going to survive this somehow. But again, and then in the end, when we learn about what his true confession was, because that was, I'm like, already they keep going back to this. I'm like, what else could he have done? So, I felt like it's definitely an interesting way to portray a protagonist in that way, because again, it's not necessarily, you know, a good guy. He's not necessarily evil. It's very much in the middle, because like what would we do if this happened to us?
Yeah, we all paint a portrait of ourselves that's very flattering. I'm a good person. I would never do that. And it's only when we get in those situations that we really find out who we really are. And being that I'm unlikely to be in that situation, I hopefully will die not knowing what I would do if I was put in Lester's situation. And I can just keep my fantasy that I'm a good man. I hope I am.
I mean, everything I've always heard about you, I've heard only good things. So, you know, I'm sure you are.
I think the best that can be said to me is I'm trying. You know.
But that's very human. We're all flawed. You know, I'm sure, you know, we're all trying. I think that's the best we can do.
Yeah, exactly.
I know you've done you know, because, you know, a lot of your career has, you know, you've done a lot of voice roles before and so on. But I noticed sometimes when you do animation, you don't always get to see like what the animation final part is going to look like. But with this, like, did you get any, like, did the creative team give you any like concept or any like images to look at to kind of inform your performance of, you know, how is my voice going to fit with Les, or was it just in the recording booth, just recording the line, and then you got to see what it all looked like?
Yeah, you know, what I was told was that these puppets were going to be life-size puppets. They were going to be as big as people. And that's all they knew. You know, at this point, the first thing one does, either in cartoon or any other animation, or I guess puppetry work, is the first thing you do is you get the performance from the actors. And then you either animate or do your puppetry following that performance. So we were recorded at the very beginning of this years-long process. And I think that they were still wondering, are we going to put life-size actors in costumes and then put a puppet head on them, and then with animatronics put expressions on those puppets, which is, I think that's what they did most of all, although they mixed up a bunch of different techniques to get these shots. I think that's what they were hoping to be able to do, but they didn't know if they were going to be able to pull it off. And there was also, you know, maybe these are just going to be oversized puppets with strings, and they were going to get into it and figure out what was going to work. But you know, having life-size puppets means that you have to have bigger sets, which is more money. It also can save money if you want to go on location. You know, if you can make that work, and I think that they did both built sets and then location work. But it was really, they were figuring it out. So no, I didn't know a whole lot, and so for me, it was just being directed. You know, like trying to find the character in the same way as if I was filming, trying to find Les, not judging him. Letting him be normal, letting him be me, and not really putting too much on it. Actually, I'm just a normal human being. Really seemed to be the point. But sometimes having that information can be really important. I was doing a video game for DC called DC Universe Online. It's still up and running, by the way.
Yeah. No, I played it. I still play it sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so they were having me play Lex Luthor, and I had just done a feature animated film called Doomsday where I played Lex Luthor, and in the feature, Lex was always hitting on Lois Lane. In not quite creepy, but he was always trying to hit on her, and I thought it would be fun to do a Lex Luthor, kind of like a quasi Hugh Hefner sort of Lex Luthor, and so it was, you know, very subtle and kind of slightly oily and charming at the same time, and kind of soft tones and trying to seduce somebody is how I approached it. And I thought that they wanted to hire me for the video game based on that performance. So I came in and started reading in that way. And I heard, James, have you seen the character rendering for Lex Luthor for the video game? And I'm like, no. Can you come into the booth, please? And so I go and I see the character rendering, the mock-up, and Lex has got battle armor on, he's got rocket launchers on both shoulders, and I'm just like, oh, you want me to butch it up a little bit? And they're like, yeah, maybe a little bit, yeah. And so I started talking like that,
It's a very different Lex for sure.
Yeah, so it's important sometimes to know how they're going to treat the character, and they may have had some sketches of Les that I could look at, and it was pretty obvious from the sketches, from whatever they showed me, it was pretty obvious that we were going to go for just a normal, average person.
Yeah, that's what I love. That's what I also loved when I was watching it, because I never felt like, when we've seen other puppet films or TV shows before, we always see the strings or whatever, but this felt like, because I couldn't tell, like, is James in a suit? Like, is he like wearing a mask? Like, I couldn't tell because it was so, again, very realistic, and that's what again, I love practical effects. So I love the fact that there was, again, I understand why this film took as long as it did to make, because I read somewhere that they started in 2015, 2016.
Yeah, they've been at this a long time, and I agree with you. If you're going to approach puppetry and make it hyper realistic, as strange as that sounds, the mastery of the puppetry to be very subtle. It's not a project where you're getting like wide puppet eyes and then they shake and they go off like the Muppet.
It's not Sesame Street.
Yeah, it ain't Sesame Street, guys. Yeah, and so it's just a slight tilt of the head and a slight fluttering of the eyes. It's very subtle, and it works. To actually the point that I forgot that what I'm watching, I think that what I was watching, and the filmmakers might correct me, but I think I was watching an actor in a costume with an animatronic puppet head on, that was the expressions for which were being controlled by puppeteers off camera. And so I just had to imagine, because the actor has to tilt their head slightly down in a thoughtful way so that the eyes can flutter. Someone else does that. And it's normal to have a team working on a puppet to get everything working and the physical expression and the facial expression blending. But to do that on that subtle of a level, I thought was something I hadn't seen before.
I think it's interesting. This film is, it's arriving now, in theaters post the strikes. I felt again, I know this film wasn't made in the, in the context of all the strikes from last year, but I felt like it was still fascinating of seeing how, hey, this is a medium that these studios can't necessarily control, that they're trying to do now with, you can't replace puppetry with AI. Like, AI can't, necessarily, you have to do it all physically. What do you hope studios take away from this film when they see that? They're kind of like, oh, because they, I admire all the people who fought last year for the writer's strike and the actor's strike, of course, and that deals were made. But we still seeing that executives are still trying to, sleaze their way through, with like, come on, just a little bit AI. So, but what do you think? How do you look at this film coming out now, post everything that has happened in the industry since last year?
I think it's a great argument against AI, actually, because AI is by its nature derivative. So AI is being trained by everything that's come before. And it is referencing and remixing basically things that have come before. But what it's not good at, all artists do this. We watch a lot of films and we reference a lot of films, but there's a creative spark that happens where something new happens. And the human brain can do that. AI doesn't do that. And so what we're going to get with AI is a bunch of stuff we've seen before on some level. And Abruptio is something that we have never seen before. It's an entirely different kind of thing. And it's nothing that an AI would ever have thought of. And so it's a great argument for just, like, I think that AI is going to be great at telling stories that other AI are going to enjoy very much. But if I want a story that's going to affect me as a human being, it has to be driven by a human being at the end of the day. And I think if we lean too much into AI, we're just not going to be surprised as much as audience members. There's not going to be that fresh thing that flips everything on its head. It's going to be kind of like, yeah, I kind of saw that before. I've seen that before. And it might be impressive, but it might be a little boring too.
Yeah, it feels like it's, if anything, AI is just a good, like, it's almost like a more living storyboard at this point, kind of like just showing like, oh, this is what we could do. What do you guys think of this before we start financing it and producing it and so on? But otherwise, yeah, for storytelling, like it's like, I imagine like if Spike, for example, was made through AI, like that wit and charm would not be. It would just, you know, the AI would just think, okay, just do a British accent and that's it. You know, or in this case, they would just. I don't know what AI would think of puppetry. So yeah, I think you're spot on with everything you're saying, and I'm hoping that executives are, you know, they learn something from this.
And you know, the other thing, you were talking about practical effects, and there is something to be like. Anytime you use a computer, it gets dated pretty quickly because computer animation gets better every year. So what fooled me back in the 90s doesn't really fool me anymore. One of the reasons that Jurassic Park, the original, worked so well is most of that stuff was not computer. We went crazy for the computer shots, but most of those shots were puppets. And the things that the projects that hold up the best, that are 10 or 20 years old, are the ones with practical effects, because that stuff is still real. And AI is going to give you, it can't do practical effects, you know, it has to do computer animated effects. And I was talking with somebody about this, and I was like, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid was just turned Hollywood on its head. It was the first movie. It was this cowboy movie with Robert Redford and the other guy. Anyway, and they filmed the entire movie on location. There was not one shot that was done in the studio. They just had everybody camping in the desert, and they were just riding horses, and they all got dusty, and it was all real. And the audience just ate it up with a spoon, man. And suddenly everybody wanted to get out and do location filming. And the whole old model of faking it and making your sunrise on a screen and making wind with a big fan, all of that stuff was just not good enough anymore. And we may pass through a similar time where we're back to faking it. And at some point, there's going to be a movie that comes out that doesn't fake it at all. And the audience is just going to be so thirsty for that. And they're going to say, that's what we want. It's going to make a ton of money, and everyone's going to want to go away from it again. But yeah, what the camera wants something real. It doesn't want to lie. It wants something to actually happen for the first time in front of the camera. It wants to document a real event. And the camera knows computerized dust. And the camera knows real dust in the sunbeam, and you clock it, even if you're not conscious of it as an audience member. You clock it.
Now that you kind of broken into, you know, horror in this capacity, you know, and I know you said that sometimes horror can be too much, but like, would you want to revisit horror through, you know, whether it is through more puppetry or animation, depending on what the project is?
It depends on the project, you know. Like what I do is I read a script, and if I find it interesting, if I find it to be something that I would want to watch, if I'm basically entertained as I'm flipping the pages and I'm wanting to flip the next page and find out what's happening rather than just get through this script, then I'm interested. And that cuts across how much money they have. It cuts across who's working on it. You know, that stuff's important too. But it really starts with, am I entertained when I read the thing? And if there's a horror film that I find interesting, then I'll do it. With the caveat that I simply am not drawn to horror as a genre. And it's a weird thing to say in this interview, but I don't want to lie. And I don't judge horror at all. I think, as I said before, I think it serves a really good purpose. So I guess it would have to be a horror film with something extra, like Abruptio, something more to say, because Abruptio is not satisfied with simply repeating the recipe of there's a bunch of charming, pretty people in a place, and then there's a horrible monster who's going to kill them one by one. And those films are exciting, and it can be fun to go watch those films, and it's all great. But Abruptio is cooking up, for me anyway, a more interesting stew, making me look at myself and question myself. So if a horror film, and there are horror films like that are addressing larger issues. There are filmmakers who are using horror to really talk about society. And I haven't seen the movies, but I hear that they're really cool. So yeah, I'm open to it. I don't want to say no to anything.
So what's coming up for you now? Like, where can we look forward to seeing you or hearing you next?
Yeah, I've got a show on Amazon Prime called Casa Grande, which is not genre. It's an update of Upstairs, Downstairs, which was an English TV series about a rich people's living in a manor, with a privileged life, and the servants who served them in that manor. And both sides were human, and neither side understand each other, and there's a cultural gulf. There's a wall between them, and they don't understand each other. And there's no judgment on either side. And so this updates that idea into the Napa Valley, present day, where the rich people are the ranchers and the wine growers, and the servants are the Latinos that work the land. And both sides are human, and neither side really understand each other, and there's a wall between them. And I just thought that was a really interesting update. So we did one season of that, and I'm hoping to hear that we're doing another season, because I just thought, I wish I could remember her name. I believe she was from Argentina. She was just an award-winning director from Argentina, and she was just absolutely fabulous, and I would love to work with her again. I'm ashamed that her name is not coming to me. And then there's a show that I'm doing on Apple Plus. It's an animated called Curses. It's for kids. I get to play a skull, a pirate skull named Larry, that I'm having the best time doing. It's so fun. And the people working on it are just at the top of their game. And like everybody who's very good at their job, they make it very easy to have fun. And so I just go in and have a bunch of fun. And then when I watch it, it's delightful. And so there's that. There's I read the Harry Dresden books, which are audiobooks, and at one point 13 of the top 15 audiobooks in America were all Dresden books. I have people coming in costume to conventions dressed as characters. And I'm awaiting the next book in that series. I've been reading those for, 15 years. I've read about 20 of them so far. I love them. I'm in a band. We're working on our 7th album. It's called Ghost of the Robot, and you can get our stuff on Spotify, iTunes. You can come see us live if you want. That's what comes to mind right now. Oh, I have a podcast called Schmachters, where I sit down with the funniest man that I know in the world, and we just take questions from the audience, trying to answer the question of, are actors, do they have any brains to speak of, or are we just a bunch of privileged idiots? And I think we proved that both are true.
I can see that for sure. I was also just hoping if I could trouble you, because the way you came into my life was through this little show called Smallville, and I've seen you back now with the guys with on Talkville and Inside of You. It's always great seeing you all you guys like reunite after all these years. I know that the Tom and Michael, they talked a lot about it. They wanted to bring back the show as an animated sequel that they're trying to develop right now. is there any, I don't know, have you talked about you maybe getting involved, because again, there's still, after your final appearance, again, I'm a huge Smallville nerd, I remember chronologically what happens. So there's still more stories I can tell with your new version of Brainiac. Would you want to revisit that character after all these years?
Oh yes, definitely. I think that Smallville was the most intelligent version of Superman that I've ever seen. Superman is a very difficult character to write because he's invulnerable, and there has to, heroism is when I help somebody, even when I have to sacrifice something to help them. That's the definition. And when you have a hero movie, you have, the very most exciting part is when the hero has to risk his life to save someone or help someone, and that's just impossible with Superman. He's invulnerable. He's going to be fine unless you pull out kryptonite. And every Superman movie does that. There's kryptonite somewhere, and at the very, he's got to risk death to do his thing. But with the television series, you can't pull out kryptonite every week. It gets redundant so fast. It gets cheesy. They sidestepped all that by not focusing on Clark's physical vulnerability, which there is almost none of. It was all about the fact that he was a teenager and he was vulnerable to everything, and they could explore emotional vulnerability for Superman. And I just thought, okay, you solved it. That's what it do. And they were able to go 10 years on that show and not be redundant, not be repetitive. And so, following that I would love to do more of that.
What do you remember from that final time shooting at because you came back for a very instrumental episode for the 200th and to very much again I think we could be best friends after what you just say. I feel Smallville is definitely the best interpretation of Superman because it focuses on it makes him more understandable in a lot of ways. But, when you came back, you took him through a very important journey for his past, present, and future. So what do you recall from that final time?
I just remember standing next to Tom and I'm asking him, when am I going to screw you over, man? And Tom was like, you read the script? And I was like, yeah, I'm really confused. I didn't get that part of it. Am I missing something? He's like, dude, you're a good guy. Relax. You're good. I'm like, really? Like fully good? Like not bad at all? He's like, nope, you're just good now. I'm like, okay. Like, wow. It was an amazing. Again, I was hoping that you would come back during that final season a little bit more, but hey, if that was the last time, that was a great way to go out. But hopefully if the anime show goes back, comes back, you get to we get to hear more of you, because that version of Brainiac, there's so much that sadly the show didn't get a touch upon, because again, once you were saved and restored by the Legion, I understand that there wasn't so much time left to explore that, but hopefully you get to revisit that, because again, that's how I think a lot of people got introduced to Brainiac just in general. Yeah. Fortunately or unfortunately, I have a very good agent and a very good manager, and they tend to get a high price when I come on a show. And so what happened, I think, with Smallville is they decided to give, since the Brainiac can morph and look however he wants, he can look like any human being that he wants. They just had their main cast play Brainiac. They saved a lot of money by doing that over the years, but I'm glad that they finally had me back for the 200th episode. Yeah, I'd love to come back again.
Well, James, it's been an honor chatting with you again. As a, if you can't tell, I'm like fanboying right now so hard. We're finally chatting with you. So, but again, this movie was amazing. I cannot wait for people to see it. Hope if they haven't already seen it, because I know it's been shown at festivals and whatnot. But hopefully, when they see it, they will take away a lot from this. Especially as because right now Hollywood can be a little. It's very, what you're saying, repetitive, but it feels like it's something very refreshing. So hopefully they will get to enjoy that.
Yeah, expect to be surprised. You're going to get the unexpected with Abruptio, for sure.
Awesome.
Is there a blessing we should say or something?
Do you think anyone's listening?